Welcome to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy, where we hear from top educators, entrepreneurs, and creative thinkers on how to design your future. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Keeping It Real podcast with Domenico and Lincoln. And today we are going to discuss rewriting the rulebook of high school education. So running off the theme of the previous episode, we're going to discuss what the ideal high school experience would look like on a national level. Currently, we're only teaching our Real World Academy curriculum in New Jersey high schools, but the idea is to expand this so that it's a piece of content that is being taught in schools across the country. So what would the scheduling, the testing, the social environment look like in a school like this? And how does Real World Academy design the high school model so it appeals to today's socioeconomic challenges? And furthermore, what are the current gaps between today's high school curricula and the expectations of the real world?
Powerful questions. So if we had to roll it out to everyone, we roll this out to everyone, what would it look like in the school? I mean, it would literally have to be every day for like a math, history, English is every day. You have to do it every day. If you're doing an hour a day. So you need the 5 hours a week minimum.
So just as English, math, science.
It has to be treated as a core curriculum. It has to be. You know.
And what would that piece
be
be called?
Successful? I mean, we can adapt to whatever, but if you really want to be successful in this, and the way school is designed now, then you have to treat it as a core curriculum.
And what would that piece be called? What would that branch be called?
It's
kind of hard to pinpoint it, right?
Because so many schools will probably do it. I mean, some schools use it as a straight out social emotional learning piece. Some schools will do it as a pre-college piece. Some schools do it as just life skills. I mean, when we had home ec, for example, that was a class in high school, so it could have fell in that same bucket. So however way they want to do it, I guess wouldn't really matter, so long as it's done, the goal is met, right?
So I think it's pretty obvious to everyone that this work is necessary. If you talk to parents, if you talk to recent graduates of high school, the consensus is that this, a lot of these common sense lessons that you're teaching with Real World Academy are needed, and everybody knows about it. So why aren't the schools teaching this already?
Because no one really knows how to deliver this. No one really knows how to do it. And also, it's so based on the teacher that everything has to be almost scripted in a sense, because everyone's blaming everyone, right? So how do I say it without sounding like so because the situation is kind of convoluted. So there's a lot of elements that play into it. And I mentioned some of them. So one aspect is, let's just have a scripted program where I can roll out, and this is what you say, this is what you're saying, this is what you're teaching, this is what you say, this is how you deliver it, right? That way, and it's a benefit to that because any teacher can come in and do that. They just read from the paper and they move on. This kind of class doesn't work that way because every class is going to be a little different. It's all about student feedback. So if students need a little bit more information in this area, then you're just going to adapt and give them that information. If they say certain things in the classroom, now you realize like you need to emphasize this a little bit more. Sometimes they need to hear a real life experience.
Right.
But if you don't have it, where do you draw it from, right? So we will have to teach how to do that. But that's what I'm saying. Every class is a little different because some students need different things to really get the material.
So what I'm getting is it's hard to standardize social emotional learning the same way that you could standardize a math curriculum.
Absolutely.
Because it's so particular to the culture of the school.
And the student body. That's right. Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Although every student needs the core piece or pieces, right? Like every student needs to know how to communicate effectively.
Right.
Right. But the examples I give are really culturally sensitive.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to talk about something that you have no connection to. Right.
Right.
So I have to use culturally relevant examples in the content in order for you to really understand it intrinsically what I'm saying. If I don't, then you're trying to guess and trying to match it to something that connects to you in your life.
Right. It's hard, and it depends on the social skills of the instructor. I think that, and we've experienced this, there could be two totally different high schools with different cultures, different local economies. You could have one high school that's in an affluent area and one high school that's in a poor area. And graduates of both of those schools don't know.
What they're going to do after graduation?
They don't know what they're going to do. They don't know.
Right. They don't know who they are.
Financial literacy.
They don't know
any of that.
Right.
So even though the problem is consistent, the way that you go about teaching it is different.
Correct.
Which is what makes it so hard to standardize.
Correct. Now, what we're teaching is the same. How we're teaching it is going to be different. And how is just as important as what. Because if the how allows them to get the what. Mm-hmm. If I don't say it in the way that they can receive it, see, this is communication. If I don't talk to you in a way that you can understand, then you're never going to get the information I'm giving to you.
Right.
I mean, I'm speaking a different language at that point, right? You're saying you're using examples I have no connection to. I have never even what is that? I don't even know what that is that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So now the student just sit there and just stare at you because they have no way to make a connection with what you're saying. So you got to have the connection, and so you got to use culturally relevant examples in a lot of this conversation. You have to. The how is so important as to the what.
Right.
So that's just one reason why it's not. No one's ever jumped on it. The way we do education in this country follows a knowledge validation process as well. The knowledge validation process is you make an argument. I'm going to make a short version of this. You make an argument. Someone makes a counter argument. You both argue it out in front of people who are supposed to be the experts in the field, and then they decide based on who wins the argument what knowledge is actually true or not, right?
But someone could just be a better arguer.
That's how it always is, right?
Yeah.
Listen, the world was flat for 100 years. Why? Because someone argued that the world was flat, and it came off better than the Earth being round. Earth's round. That doesn't make any sense. Right. You see the horizon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounded better at the time.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, people actually went out there, and they realized we did not drop off. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. So now we have to go back to the drawing board and have the whole new argument again, where if we're not dropping off, where are we going? So clearly, somebody went further and came back through the opposite way. Mm-hmm. We're going in circles. Now, there's a whole other argument. The experts now agree. That's it, right? So
how does this tie? So how does this tie into the education system's inability to adapt and modernize
because
itself?
You need to be able to prove and justify this, and enough people are not in it and they're not being heard enough to have that argument. So if I say to you that this is the problem with these kids, right? Now I can everything we're saying about the problems are really oversimplifications. There's so many nuances to it, but those nuances is what makes the argument harder to give.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? It's not clear enough, and everybody has their opinion about it. So we can't get on the same page about what the actual problem is. And if I tell you the problem is you, which basically a lot of times we're basically pointing the finger back at parents, no one wants to admit to that.
Nobody can have that.
So no one can get on board over what the actual problem is. So they get around certain things like mentoring. They need more mentoring, right? So that's the biggest thing. It's very hard to quantify also. Things have to be able to be quantifiable. We have to be able to measure everything. How do you measure? Now, here's the thing. The funny part is a lot of things that we talk about in the Real World Academy, people are just now realizing they did a study, 20-year study, to find out what we already knew, right? But that's the knowledge validation process. You can't just come out and say, this is the problem with these kids. Because then they're going to say, well, where do you get that evidence from?
Well, it's part of the problem, too, that we're looking at the wrong data points in schools. So, schools that solely dictate their actions based on graduation rate and grades that are insanely inflated.
But that's how you measure success in education.
Right.
And that's not just in education. You have to have numbers. You got to be able to, I can't say to you that I can't talk about graduation to you, the reason why kids didn't graduate, without numbers. It's just not possible. There's no way, and then funding is tied to that too, right?
Yeah.
So I can't, because everything becomes anecdotal. Like, how do you know that the reason why is because of that?
Right.
Because you got to prove everything. The knowledge validation says, again, you got two people arguing. Two people have to argue and prove to the team of experts that they are right.
Yeah.
How do I prove it when everything I have came from experiences, conversations, all of that? None of that's quantifiable. I can't say. So what's quantifiable is we have 80% of our students failing came from single-family homes. 80% of our kids failing came from low-income housing, right? 80% of our kids came from immigrant families, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. That is the numbers, right? Although that's true, now we have to get into perspective. See, this is where a lot, especially, when I went to school and I studied, it was education and social change. It was a class called Education and Social Change, one of the best classes I ever had in college. And I was a business major, but I took that, right? And I said, this is in the public administration. This is this is in my undergrad. I took it. And so the reading that we had, the author was actually arguing against the knowledge validation process. And they were saying that it's not culturally sensitive at all. And it just does not work for Black communities. The knowledge validation process does not allow for the researcher to take into consideration the cultural nuances that exist that you can't quantify. It just doesn't allow for that.
What are those?
So we can't say, you could say that, oh, well, if they're poor, if they're single family, yada, yada, and then, because those start off the quantifiable numbers, this is the reason why, right? And then they'll add on additional justifications that may be more qualifiable. Like, well, if you're a single parent, then you don't have time to sit with your kids and do that, right? And if you're poor, you really are so consumed with how you're going to feed yourself the next day, you can't. So now you start making assumptions based on that. Now, some of those assumptions may be true. We're not saying that, it's totally false. But then you say to yourself, well, you don't even live in those cities or those homes that you're talking about to really know exactly how it functions. So then when you do, you go in those homes, and that's what I was telling the students today. I said, y'all ain't poor because you look at them sneakers. You got a pair of Yeezys on.
Yeah.
Poor people can't wear Yeezys. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why am I in your house and you got sneakers stacked from the floor to the ceiling?
Yeah.
Right? And that's why now we're having conversations. You hear this now, conversation about poverty being a mindset, right? Mm-hmm. Now it's not just about a number anymore. It's not just about you making $15,000 a year or less, right? It's about what do you do with that money that you have, right? Mm-hmm. Now people are saying those kind of things. Not enough, in my opinion, but now they're starting to go that direction. Because they realize that the old argument is just not working. So now they're coming up with some new argument now. But anyway, the point is that they're always thinking of something different to argue. The knowledge validation process forces you to argue the point to validate that you know what you're talking about to a team of experts. And so those experts want to see the numbers. They want to see facts. They want to see evidence to support it. Evidence is always going to be based on some measurable thing. The problem here is that the evidence that supports what I'm going to say has no quantifiable evidence. You just have to know. You have to be able to know. And I can give you interviews. I can ask you questions. Now, here's the other thing. When you ask questions of a candidate, right, you're doing research and you're asking questions, if I come to your home and I quiz you, right, my presence, you're going to give me answers based on what you think I want to hear.
Yeah.
And you're going to respond to me based on what you see, right? If your only interaction with white people, if you're black and the only interaction with white folks has always been through a service provider or a health services or mental services or police officers or whatever else, never really in a true social setting, then you're going to respond in that way that you're used to talking to them every time you go to the office and you got to talk to them about something, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be as candid with them as you would your friend next door. Right? So you're going to not say anything, or sometimes you're not even going to think about saying those things, right? It's just natural. You're just not going to talk the same way to everybody.
Right.
So how do I get the right information from you? How do I get that personal information from you? If I say, and I can ask you the questions. Now, here's the thing. Who's writing the questions? Right? The questions are not suitable for this population. And it's not just racial. It's nationality. Especially in the United States, we have a whole bunch of people from whole different places. You got to be culturally competent in order to ask the question. Those questions won't work for this population. You got to ask a wholly different. You can't even go into the conversation this way. But the knowledge validation process gives you strict ways to gather information.
So what I'm hearing is the education system is not set up to deal with cultural nuances.
No.
That allow.
And no, they're not. And I had a conversation. It was funny. I put it on Facebook. You know, the politics operates the same way. You know, the Democrats, for example, they may say, we're all for immigration, you know, getting dreamers to be citizens, opening the border up and trying to just bring more inclusivity, right? And their thinking is that they're going to get the Latino vote because they're, you know, being more open and receptive to the Latino populations coming across and having, you know, this whole politics that you're hearing about that, right? Mexico, Central America. But you're a fool to think that all Latinos are the same.
That's not a nuanced thing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're boxing everybody in because that is the script. That is the political script, right? You think that putting maybe black people in different positions will encourage you to get black votes, right? No, that's not how black folks always think. You know what I'm saying? So even though you can say one thing, your actions show something different. It's just the way we script things in our society is really like the one-size-fit-all way. And even though you ask the person, we say, oh, no, one size don't fit all. But that's literally how we still do business.
Yeah.
We literally still do business.
And that's how we teach. We teach the same core curriculum to an insanely diverse population of students in every sense.
Right.
And how could you possibly just think about the number of inputs and then the number of outputs?
Right.
So you're putting 1,000 students in a high school through the identical experience.
Yeah.
What makes you think that that is going to benefit even a majority of the population?
And you can ask them that and they can agree with you, but they haven't changed it because, again, I believe the knowledge validation process does not. So if you know what you got to go through to change a curriculum, this is why charter schools started popping up because, well, I shouldn't say that's the reason, but that was part of the incentive for people buying into the charter school process.
Of the freedom?
Because of the flexibility, the freedom to change things up. Now, the problem is they're doing the exact same thing, maybe in a different way, but they're really doing the exact same thing. You know, they're coming up with this formula and then rolling that formula out.
So I just want to make clear, the case that we're making is the difference with the Real World Academy curriculum is that it does address these nuances.
Yes.
And it does allow for more of an open environment that's flexible depending on the students.
Yes.
We're not just handing you a set of instructions that says teach this to every single student this exact way.
Correct. It's a very difficult thing, which is why most don't even do it. But I can't see pretty much anybody doing it because how do you do that?
Yeah.
You know, first of all, you have to be consciously aware of other cultures in order to do that. And that requires you to then go in and then create something specifically and differently for each and every culture. Like, it's a lot to do, right? And then the reality is, what do people, like in all my time, I've talked to people, they really don't know what I know the way I know it, right? I can talk to them and they understand it, what I'm saying, and they say, you know what, you're right. That is so true. But again, they never thought of it the way I'm saying it, right? Or they knew this to be true, but they never thought about rolling that out as a curriculum or, or doing anything with it, because they're caught up in the programming themselves. They gave me a script I got to read from. I don't really like it. I know it shouldn't be this way, but, this is what it is.
Yeah.
So, but it's a challenge. And I think, again, we naturally run away from challenges. We naturally run away from things that are difficult. And again, going back to the whole thing of accountability, if it doesn't go right, how do you figure this out? Like, one thing you could say is that, oh, well, your child should have had this, and this, because that's what the teacher would have said. Why? Because we have the evidence to support that the teacher said it. We gave the teacher a script, right? Mm-hmm. So that's accountability measure at the same time, too. You're not letting the teacher just go off and say what they want anymore. They used to. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. Now, the other thing is, to answer your question of why we don't do it, because you can't, the real issue is the home. I don't care what you do in the school. You only got the student for 5 to 6 hours a day, okay? You can't undo 18 hours of programming in 6 hours. Like, that's just not going to happen, all right? You maybe reach some of them, but not when you got 1,000 kids in the school. You're not guaranteed. That number, that ratio, that return on investment is not that high, in my opinion.
And I want to introduce another idea that I know you're very passionate about, and it has to do with this. Schools overcompensating for the fact that they can't handle this nuance. How do they do it? Through grade inflation.
Oh, yeah. And a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the problems of being, when you want to be culturally competent and sensitive is that you're too sensitive, right? And you allow for things. So now the standards are lowered because, well, they can't do it because, this and this. And people catch on to that and they play on it, to be quite honest.
Of course.
I think they
it's human nature.
Use it. They they're going to hook me up. They're going to let me slide because they know I'm poor, whatever. But the reality is that, especially with children, the higher the standard you put, the more they work to achieve it.
Yeah.
You keep lowering the standard, they're going to settle wherever you let them settle at.
Yeah.
Because why? Because it's hard or it's difficult, and who wants to do anything that's challenging? It want to be easy.
I remember, I keep bringing up music examples, but
sorry. I mean, that's what you do. So.
When I was in middle school, best teacher I ever had was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Schumacher, and he was known as this really, really tough guy, militant type instructor, and he would treat us in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as if we were professional musicians, as if we were adults, and I remember really, really respecting him for that because he was the only teacher up to that point who treated me like a person and like a man rather than a pupil.
Right.
So, and not to brag, but we won so many competitions against high school bands. Not because, in my opinion, we were intrinsically more talented than anyone else, but we had this no-nonsense regimen that the students ended up liking because they developed confidence that way and they felt like adults and like they were competent musicians. And that's what made us such a great band, and it was just such a life lesson for me.
It's so interesting you say that because even with the challenges of rolling out this course, and students are like, whoa, I don't know what this course is about, and them even not doing the work because they're getting so used to, not having to do work in school and still getting over.
But it's probably refreshing to them.
And I realize that because when we do the surveys at the end, over half the class always say they would recommend to someone else or they would take the class again or for a longer period of time. How is it you did no work in this class, but yet you want this class over again? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to that point because I think they're getting something that they've never gotten before. And I know they've never gotten this before. They're getting something they've never gotten before. They're getting treated a certain way they've never been treated before. And they like this way.
Yeah. Students like to be held accountable. They like to be treated as equals.
Exactly. So why can't we give them that? One of the rules in my class, I have 3 rules, maybe 4. I say, don't ask me to use the bathroom. Okay?
Oh, I hated that.
Just go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Why am I 18 years old asking some guy to use the bathroom?
Go to the bathroom. If you need a pass, the pass is in the back. But let me tell you this. There's only one pass for the class. Yeah. And I'm not sitting here writing 5 passes.
Don't go taking a stroll.
So y'all can figure it out,
Yeah.
okay, amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
If you want to spend a whole hour in the bathroom, that's on you. But your peers are going to be upset with you, and your peers need to take it up with you. Don't ask me. The other thing is, I don't care if you're paying attention or not. This is on you, not on me. I already know this stuff.
Yeah.
Why should I care that you don't know this? You see what I'm saying?
It's on you to digest it.
It's on you to digest.
Yeah.
And if you need help, that's something different. But if you want to sit here and play on Facebook all day while I'm talking, hey, that's on you.
Yeah.
I'm not repeating myself. Okay? And so I hope you're taking good notes, or you got a friend that's taking good notes that you can copy off, because this is it for you.
It's like in college. You don't have to go to a single lecture if you don't want to.
And that's what I tell them. I said, this is the real world. No one is chasing after you to do right by you. No one is chasing after you so you can do right by yourself. They're not doing that. They're not doing that.
So how do students react to it?
They're like, oh, this is good. They like it.
Yeah.
You know, it's different. You know, so they're like, okay. You know, and I tell them, I say, if you want to talk, go in the hallway and talk. Don't do it in here.
Yeah.
You know? Now, what happens outside my classroom, I can't control. So if you get in trouble in the hallway, that's on you. You already know the rules of the school.
Yeah.
But I don't really care. If you want to sleep, I don't care. Because I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to get paid for saying it. And we all going to be good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not stressing over that. The other thing is, I don't accept late work. If it's late, it's a 0.
Yeah.
Period. I'm not accepting late work. So one student said, why don't you accept late work? Oh, you want me to work hard because you didn't? Because that's all it's doing.
Yeah.
When you take it down to the next week or 2 weeks later, I then have to grade that on top of the new stuff that I'm now doing? Why should I do that?
It's not your problem. Yeah.
Why would you make my life harder because you want to be lazy?
Yeah.
First of all, that's selfish. And 2, I'm not doing it.
Man, it's so weird how these ideas are just being introduced to students. And I don't mean to keep saying that.
And they're not being introduced.
Yeah.
Now, and this is even going into the colleges, what they're doing is adapting to the fact that these students are not ready.
And you got to talk more about the grade inflation, because that's directly what I was leading to.
And I was going to that too. Yeah. So some schools do not give you a 0 when you got a 0. Some schools say your minimum is a 50.
That's setting such a bad precedent.
The minimum is a 50.
Yeah.
So even though you got a 10 average in my class, your final grade will show as a 50. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't know why, and then they don't want to say it's an F. They come up with all kinds of fancy things to describe a failure now. And I'm saying, what difference does it make? I mean, listen, if I say that's no longer a cup, we're not going to call this a cup anymore. Okay? We're going to call it, I don't know, paper. All right, so that's now paper. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you call it. It's still what it is. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So the whole idea of changing the name of something is kind of laughable, because I'm like, it still conveys the same thing. Now, the grade inflation is a problem because you're basically allowing this student because in the moment you say, well, 50 or 0 is still an F. True. However, because we grade a cumulative process, we have accumulation process, the GPA, you are inflating the grade over time, because that's 50, which should have been a 10, you're giving this person 40 more points towards their average than they should have gotten. And so now that adds up when you add in each year, each market period, adding up towards the end. So they have a higher GPA at the end of 12th grade than they would have or should have, because of all the 50s that they got instead of 0s.
And this is what drives me crazy. It makes the school look good to the detriment of the student. So school systems, in many ways, value their appearance. And I get it, it's for budgeting and all that. But schools will value their appearance in terms of how they're performing over the student experience.
It's political.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that happens in colleges, right? So, for example, at Rutgers, Rutgers has the College of Business of Newark and New Brunswick. Now, again, it may have changed by the time people hear this. I don't know. I doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
But the GPA requirement to stay in the School of Business in Newark was about 2.5, and the GPA requirement in New Brunswick was 3.0. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're the same school with the same dean. Okay? Normally, so let me back up so everybody understands how this works. A university can have multiple locations, and each location is its own kind of university in itself. Okay? Rutgers is one of those. The university system of New York, for example, SUNY, State University of New York, they have a university in Poughkeepsie, they got a university in New York City, they got CUNY, they got City University of New York, they got one in each borough, right?
Mm-hmm.
They, within each borough, is its own university. The Manhattan borough has CUNY Manhattan, right?
Right.
So they operate, they have their own chancellor, they have their own operation, they do their own thing. The one in Brooklyn does their own thing. Cumulative together, they operate under a president, right?
Right.
And a board. So Rutgers is very similar. Rutgers has about 4 locations, and each location operates independently, but they all report to a central board of governors, okay? Within the individual university under the Rutgers umbrella, you have different colleges, okay? Colleges, multiple colleges make up a university. So you have the College of Arts and Science, you have the College of Business, College of Public Administration, you have the College of the Law School. So all these are different colleges/schools. The dean of the College of Business, the business school, is the exact same dean in Newark as it is in New Brunswick. It's the only dean that straddles 2 different universities under Rutgers. Every other dean has just their one at their specific location. So you're talking about one dean creates one school. There is no school, Business School of Newark and Business School of New Brunswick. They combine them to have one school just in 2 separate locations. We're talking about one school.
With 2 different sets of requirements.
With 2 different sets of requirements. How is that possible? It would have been different, again, if you have the School of Newark have a requirement and the School of New Brunswick has a requirement. Although they're both Rutgers, the arguments can still be made because they're technically still different and separate.
So why did that happen?
Because years ago, there was this push to bring in more Newark residents. Rutgers Newark has always been Newark focused, trying to, bring more Newark residents and greater Newark residents to Newark and support the community of Newark. But there was a push to increase the enrollment of Newark residents and to increase the graduation rate of Newark residents. And it became an issue to just increase the graduation rate of low-income students or people who have, and again, going back to the numbers, low income connects to, not ready for college, essentially, So what they did was they said, well, it seems to me when you do the report, do the research, remember everything has to be justified by research, and research requires quantifiable data. So if you run all the numbers, you see the correlations, you see that people who come from this demographic graduate far less than those who come from this demographic. People from this demographic drop out of school at this higher rate than this demographic. People who come from this demographic have struggles with keeping up with the curriculum than this demographic, right? So to satisfy it, what we'll do, that since we have a lot of this demographic that is struggling to get in, struggling to stay in, struggling to graduate, we want to encourage more of them to come to our school. We have to do something different, because if we don't, we're pretty much setting them up for failure. And the public's view is always critical of colleges, saying, oh, you just want more money. You want to keep kids in school longer so you can make more money off of them. You don't care if they graduate on time. You just want to, you just did it. Everything is just like you, especially public universities, right?
Yeah.
Public universities are the only ones that kind of got an answer to the public. So this one, thinking they were being proactive, I mean, this happened before we even started seeing all these conversations, okay? This has happened years ago, before I even got there. They decided they were going to bring the GPA requirement down so that students who can't meet it aren't automatically kicked out, because they're figuring that they probably just need a little bit more help.
Okay.
Right? But the kids that go to New Brunswick clearly don't need no help, because when you look at the numbers, they're graduating at a particular rate, right? The numbers show they don't need it. The kids in Newark, on the other hand, and the population that Newark is trying to serve, seem that they're going to need it. So we'll lower the standard for them so they can get in. On the surface, it sounds good. It's a noble idea. I get what you're trying to do, but the effect is actually the quite opposite.
Sure.
Now,
so what ends up happening?
Well, nothing. I mean, people still go to school and they just graduate, and it's just easier to graduate from the one school versus the other. I mean, nothing really changes. There's still a bunch of people that go to the school and still have problems. Now, the problem, though, is that the problem really isn't addressed, because you can't address it at the college level, and there's nothing the college can do to fix this problem. The problem happened before the kids got to college in the first place.
You're trying to manufacture equal outcome without solving the problem of unequal opportunity.
That is the nature of the United States as a whole. That's the culture. We put Band-Aids on everything. We never truly address the problem. We just come up with some solution.
Some scheme.
Some scheme, right. Because, again, it goes back to our earlier conversation about avoidance. It's too difficult to address.
Yeah.
You cannot fix the home. No outside person can go in and fix the home. Okay? No college professor can fix your home. No college president can go and fix your home. No school principal can fix your home. No school teacher. No politician can fix your home. There's no law that allows the entrance into the home unwanted. Okay? So therefore, there's only but so much you can do, because all the problems are in the home. Okay? A kid can't read and write. That is not just the school's fault that the kid can't read and write. In fact, it might be not the school's fault at all the kid can't read and write.
Yeah.
Why isn't the parent putting in the extra effort to get their kids up to the reading level? They have to work with the school to address that. You can't just say, well, my kid can't read, it's on you. You got to fix that. See, again, that's the nature of our culture here.
Nuanced, right.
But our nature of our culture here is to blame someone else. See, lack of accountability, going back to that again, right? Something that we try to teach kids. This is your life. You got to own it. But we always push it on someone else. We're telling the colleges, you have to do better. We're telling the high schools, you have to do better. We're telling the middle schools, you have to do better. But at no point we're saying, I, as a parent, have to do better. And if I don't know how to do better, I have to live in my truth and say, I can't help my children the way they need to be helped. What do I do?
Right.
Okay? Now, here's the other part. Some parents do that. But where do they go? There's nothing out here. Because you know what? Everyone has the same formula for fixing it.
You're right.
And that formula is designed not to work, right? So, unless you can raise the kid yourself, if you know it, there's nothing else you could do. You know? You can't, there's nothing really anybody outside the home can do for your children when they have really fundamental issues, right? Which is why boarding schools were created, right?
So if you had a school, a Real World Academy Institute, that did have the socio-emotional learning aspect as one of the 5 pillars of education, how would that function, and how would you do it differently?
Oh, they would have to live there. They would have to. There is no way around it. Residency, you got to have them living there.
And what would the student population be?
Well, anybody. I mean, you could do for anything. I mean, it doesn't really matter. There's no specific. I mean, they're all suffering in different ways, but they all need the same thing. You know what I mean? So, come one, come all, right? Anyone who could do it. Now, again, we live in the United States, and you can afford to come.
But is it a good idea for everyone to be separated from their home for that period of time? Or is this only for people
if they
who
need it?
Only
Absolutely.
So what are the requirements? Who needs this work?
Well, there's no way to... I think they all need it, to be quite honest.
Would there be an application process? Would there be a...
Oh, so yes. So, I mean, well... The application won't have anything to do with to say if you need it, right? The application, I think it probably would base on, I see what you're saying. There's only a limited number of seats.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to get in. How do you select the 1,000 kids that's going to get in, right? Or the 100 kids you get in? Probably will have to be based on recommendations, you know, until we come up with an actual process. Because it's very hard to quit. You can't, it's kind of hard to really say what a kid, who really deserves it. Because, you know, there's so many that need it that it's really, how do you determine that? So it probably had to go by recommendation, especially if they've been seeing a total downward decline of the students' progress grade-wise, and they're getting into trouble. I think the most troubled kids, you know, the ones, now that I say that, right, maybe the ones that's getting into a lot of trouble.
They need to have that separation.
Right, they need to have that separation.
Because I could conceive of a situation, and we've had students like this, where it probably wouldn't be a good idea to separate the student from the home, but they still do need to be taught this content. And that's where the utility of introducing this kind of curriculum into pre-existing schools happens. And teaching students on a one-on-one basis. So I just want to make clear, the boarding school concept is for a targeted population.
So I would like, for example, you talk to parents, and some parents, we don't want to get it confused with the normal resistance of high school students, right? Because high school students go through a phase no matter what. Okay? Your adolescence just is a crazy phase for everybody. So we don't want to confuse that with they need help versus they're just going through a phase. We have to be very clear about that. The other thing is, I think there's some parents, and this is where the problem is, that we have all these resources out here, but you know who it takes advantage of? The parents who really don't need it. You know what I mean? Like,
the ones who are overcompensating.
Like you're good. You know what I mean? I could give you a couple things to fix, but you don't need me, you know.
You don't need more,
you know what I'm saying? So, as I say that everyone needs it, the parent can do it on their own. They can probably just use some coaching to kind of help them out. So yes, you're right. Not everyone has to come through our doors and, you know, to get what we're giving. You know, you can really just sit with some parents and say, well, if that's the only problem you're having, I suggest you just do X, Y, and Z. There's some parents that are really great I've talked to. They're just a little bit overprotective. And I'm like, okay, it's time for them to touch the fire a little bit to know it's hot. You kind of shut off the gas in the house. You don't have to shut off the gas in the house to protect them from the fire. Like, it's okay. Just teach them a little bit more and let them try it out, you know. Let them be responsible. Just give them chores. You know. Because some of these kids are really bright and smart and catch on very quickly. It's just that they haven't been given anything to really learn worth learning. You know, so they're bored. They're just like, I could do times tables and this and that, but this ain't nothing. So as you give them that, they'll catch on. So those aren't, you're right, those aren't the ones that really need to be in the boarding school. The ones that need to be in the boarding school are the ones that have parents that really don't know what to do, and they're not capable of even changing their ways to do it.
And just to be clear, you're not taking children away from their parents.
No. Well, first of all, you can't.
You can't.
You know,
but we're not encouraging that. It's a situation where it's fundamentally clear that this is necessary.
Like,
for every part.
You have done so far 2 years in high school, and we have not seen, we're seeing a steady decline from 8th grade. Like, at some point, you have to just count your losses and say, this is not working, right? Your kids skipping days. They're never going to school. They have more days absent than days present. Why is that, right? So, sidebar really quick. So I was in this, they were doing total school reform in Newark. And I was in this they pulled a bunch of us together from different organizations who kind of work with youth. And they had these different scenarios on the wall, and it was like, so what do we say about the attendance rate? And it was like, the attendance rate is, and you look at the data, because everybody's, again, going back to data, everything's data driven, right? And I'm not knocking data. I just want to say that. I'm not knocking data, but it's a way you have to go about looking at this stuff. So I'm going to give you an example. So they said the data is clear, right? The kids are not going to school during the winter months, right? Mm-hmm. What is that about, right?
They're skipping school.
Skipping school, right? Mm-hmm. They're all these kids are missing schools from November to February. The absentee is off the charts. So the rationale around the room is the weather, right? It's cold, snow, rainy, whatever, right? So then they said, well, we will give, and then some students are walking to school and they don't want to walk to school in inclement weather, you know. And so they started giving out bus tickets. Right? They started this whole thing with giving out bus tickets to students. And they've been doing that for a while, by the way. And even before this meeting that we had. And they were giving out bus tickets, and they said the students were still not showing up for school. And they said, well, what could be the reason that they're not? They said, well, maybe we need to have, mentors, to talk to the kids, to help them understand, yada, yada. And I said to them, why would you think? Oh, no. They go back to the inclement weather and the bus ticket thing, and we need to take them to school and, and all that. Or, the mentor piece. So I said, you really think that giving bus tickets to the students will help them go to school?
Yeah, they'll just use it to go other places.
I said, they're already getting bus tickets, they ain't going to school, number one. Yeah. Number two, I said, you really think that a mentor is really going to be the one to get them to come to school if they know they come to school to see their mentor? They have to go to school to see their mentor. So they're not getting there. They're not thinking about that. Mm-hmm. What the issue here is, why do they not want to go to school? You have not addressed that question
Nobody
at
asked
all.
that.
No one asks the question.
Yeah.
You're coming up with all these solutions, but you never once asked the kid, why you don't want to go to school?
Right.
What's wrong with school?
Why don't they want to use the bus ticket? Yeah.
Or you use the bus ticket to go somewhere else. Why do you not want to go to school? And the reality is you don't like the answer. School is boring. I don't like it. I don't like my teachers. I don't like this. There's a whole bunch of things they don't like. So we need to start looking at the value system. See, we don't have that value system here in the United States about education, number one. That's another thing. But addressing the why is what we tend not to do. It's easier to throw bus tickets at something. It's easier to throw a mentoring program at something. That's not what they want.
What would a value system for our education system look like?
Teaching them why is relevant. So one of the benefits of living in other countries is that there's a nationalistic pride. And nationalistic pride is easy when everybody around you is the same.
When it's a homogenous culture.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We all have a same history. So even if I don't like you, we're definitely doing this because we want what we know to be true for us to continue.
Yeah.
Okay? This is why some families, build legacies very easily, because they say no matter what, this family has to continue on this legacy that we've created, right?
Yeah.
You're raised in that. That's not something you're just mentioned at the dinner table.
Right.
You're raised in that. You see the pictures of these great people in your family who've done these great things. You hear stories, legends, right? You go to the family picnics and gatherings, you see all these great people. That's the motivation that's built in you from 4 or 5 years old, right? Mm-hmm. So no matter what you do, no matter how many times you've fallen out with a family member, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, we got to come together because things got to get done, right? The mission is clear. The United States does not have true nationalism, okay?
It's manufactured, yeah.
And it's not even manufactured. It's really just it's like
compartmentalized.
Yeah, it's like you have a feeling about it, and I have a feeling about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My feeling about it is totally different from your feeling about it. Why? Because there is no common shared history on this country.
Right.
Right? There's a common history in the sense of these are the things that happen along the lines, right? 1766, 1778, this and that. Like you learn about this in U.S. History 1 and 2, right? But internalizing my internal history through the ages in this country is totally different from yours. You know, I go back to my great-grandfather. He was on a plantation. Yours wasn't. You see what I'm saying? So how can we talk about national pride when this nation is totally different for us?
And you're saying that has a direct tie to the fact that we don't have a unified value system with how we teach students.
Values are based in cultures, okay? Cultures come from shared histories, shared experiences. All these things are shared, right? We create cultures in the schools, right? We create culture in the school. During that time we're there, we create a culture. It's shared experience. So if we tie this back into history and nationalism, those things create purpose. The average individual growing up in this country has no purpose. People without a purpose end up like where we are right now. Religion, for a long time, gave people purpose.
But that's on its way out.
Exactly, because now people are questioning it, you know. But for a long time, it gave people the purpose. Yeah. Okay? People need a purpose.
Unfortunately, and this is, getting a little bit off topic, but with the fact that religion is getting less and less popular, politics is becoming people's religion. So you have these ideologies that people attach themselves to and assign so much meaning to.
Because people need that.
Yeah. They're searching for it in everything.
Exactly. They need to know, what do I do? It can't just be enough for me to go to work every day. For what purpose am I doing this for?
Yeah.
What's my purpose in life? You know, why am I doing this? Without purpose, let me tell you, it's a whole bunch of other things that come from that.
But you don't even get to the place where you're able to define your purpose until you discover who you are, you analyze your personal history.
That's how you begin to identify your purpose.
Yeah.
You go through that.
And that's why we start with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got to get that purpose down because you don't, and this is not conscious, right? No one's conscious. I mean, some people may be, but the reality is most people are not thinking that purpose is connected to all my problems, right? They're not constantly thinking of that.
It may arise in their consciousness eventually through doing that work.
Through our work, they come to realize that, but they don't realize that that's the connection. So you have to make the connection for them and say, this is what you really understand. Like, know who you are. We know who we are. We know who we come from. We know that's the only way you know where you're going.
Yeah.
Right? To understand your future, you got to know your past. So when you don't have those answers, you just kind of wander, trying to figure things out.
Right.
And that's frustrating. That's aggravating. That's depressing. That's all the other things. You have children that adds another layer of frustration on top because you really don't want children, but you did it because you feel like you need to be loved in the moment. That
was going to solve everything.
Yeah, listen, people do it all the time.
I know.
Man.
I know.
So, that's really what the crux of the problems are. Is that so when we talk about the culture, the nature in the United States is that we don't have purpose. And what nationalism does is helps you create purpose. Because you don't have to do it for you. You don't do it for anything. You do it for us.
Yeah.
And that is taught. You go to any country, they taught their country's history. It helps drive home the purpose.
Yeah.
Right? You are taught this. So you never veer too far. And I'm not saying that solves all your problems everywhere. But in the United States,
and we're not being pro-nationalism
Right.
necessarily.
I'm not saying that, like nationalism in the sense that we talk about in television. That's not the nationalism I'm talking about. I'm saying that nations, especially very old ones, they talk about their history and they share their history. And okay, let me consider another way. We do through U.S. History 1 and 2. Why? Because knowing about your nation's history is important.
Yeah.
Every country does that. You got to know about your nation's history. Why is knowing about your nation's history important? Because it tells you exactly why things are the way they are now, and it helps you understand how to get to wherever you're trying to be in the future. Right? The problem with history in the United States is that the history of each individual is going to be different. When you talk about our historical narrative is different.
And the way that history is taught doesn't take into account that level of nuance.
No.
So people get frustrated when they're taught this
That they can't relate to.
the storybook version of American history. That is 1/100th of what happened.
And that's not even, so, the thing here is that we can, when you go home, right, because then everything has to be reinforced in home. No one at home is talking about U.S. History 1, not in my family, right?
Yeah.
We're not. What does that have to do with us?
Yeah. You're
The
not talking
Pilgrim and the
about
Mayflower?
Plymouth Rock.
You know what I'm saying? That was not had to do with us. That's not benefit us. But if that aligns with your family's history, then you know what? When you come home, you hear about it again.
Yeah.
And you are built up on that, and you are proud of that, and that motivates you in many different ways, right?
Yeah.
That strengthens you. So
And it gives you identity.
it gives you identity. Yeah. And identity is very, very important as well. Who are you? I am this. My descendants are this.
I'm this because of this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
And so all those things are linked together. The broader culture and the country has to have a particular narrative. It has to be repeated within the local community, has to then be repeated in the home, and that's how the child grows up.
Yeah.
In their strength. It's strengthened, right? Because they get in the house, they get outside the house, everywhere they go, they're reminded. That's the nature of the country. That's the nature of the culture here. Yeah. I know who I am. I know no matter where I go, I'm reflected everywhere I am. That's it. The United States just doesn't have that. And it's not a negative thing, and I don't think it's ever going to change. It's that we're very heterogeneous.
Uniqueness.
That's the uniqueness, right?
Yeah.
So the question is always, knowing that, what do we now do? We just have to do things different. Again, going back to complexities. We made this very complex. We have this very complex issue. So you can't just, here's the script for it. You can't. You got to create something very...
You got to create a system that's adaptable
right
to cultural nuance, and that's what we're doing with Real World Academy curriculum.
Exactly. You brought in all these different cultures to live together, and you did not create anything for them. How do you do that? You got 5 different people here, and only the script only relevant to one person in the room.
Yeah.
And yet you want everybody to get along.
Yeah. Well, that's the metaphor for our education system as a whole. I'm glad we're filling in the gaps, at least with Real World Academy. Yeah. So let's leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and tune in to the next episode of Keeping It Real with Real World Academy. Thank you for listening to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy. If you're a student looking for a mentor or a parent looking to help your kid design a happy life and a successful career, visit our website at realworldacademy.org and subscribe to us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you listen to podcasts to hear more exclusive content on how to design your future.